So welcome back with Taking Lunch with Korben London, where I spent about 30 minutes talking to people who haven't quite made it yet, but are really on their way. Today's guest, we have Jack Biebel. He is the co-founder of a brand new shop out here, sandwich shop out here in LA, Giada. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct.
Pronounce that
Yep.
correctly? Cool. So, co-founder of a brand new shop out here. He's from New Jersey, moved out to LA, made the leap. Now he's an entrepreneur and a businessman. So, excited to talk with you, Jack, just to sort of learn more about how you did it.
Thanks, man. No, happy to be here. Ready to talk. Let's do it.
Awesome. So, taking it back, you graduated from University of Maryland. That's sort of the our connection. When you
Yeah.
moved out to LA, or excuse me, before that, did you move out to LA knowing that this is what you wanted to do to open up this sandwich shop, or how did that work out?
No, definitely not. The progression is definitely not that. Not linear at all. So after Maryland, I moved to like Silicon Valley. I was working at a consulting firm based like right in San Jose, Palo Alto, like that area. Very technology focused, like client work. Really didn't like San Francisco.
Okay.
And so after like a year, one of my best friends from growing up had moved to LA while I was out there, and I was flying down there once a month to see him. And just coincidentally, my seven best friends that I grew up with in New Jersey all relocated in LA together in the house I'm in right now. And this is 2018, so about a year and a half after I graduated from Maryland. So we moved into this house. And so that was like really what planted the seeds for like Giada becoming a thing. We all shared like the same childhood memories of like kind of just any function we had in high school, sporting, prom, like going to lunch at school was at Belgivine's on Bloomfield Avenue in our hometown. And so like this was like a very like fundamental aspect of like our friendship growing up. And so when we came to LA, like by nature, we're just out looking for delis. And in 3 months, we basically determined that what we felt was a good deli didn't exist. And so that was like the first aha moment was like, okay, there's just no good delis. And then slowly but surely, it came into like a weekend hobby of like, okay, if we were going to build a deli, like what would it look like? And we had a much larger vision for like what we wanted Giada to be that I can get into, but it's kind of off topic. But we basically, we had a brand deck, which became a business plan, which by the end of 2019 was going to be a food truck. We're going to launch at Coachella in 2020. And so we're pacing into April. COVID does its thing.
Right.
Coachella doesn't happen. Fortunately, we had not made any binding purchases from a like food truck or labor, nothing. We had spent nothing. So we had the ability to pivot at this point in time. I had just been laid off at the startup I was working at. My co-founder Noah had a couple months prior quit his job in tech to work at a restaurant to kind of get his bearings back. And he's ready to go at this point. He was ready to go in April, so we had to figure out how to kind of reorient ourselves. And so, in this months between April and June of 2020, we're just focused on like, okay, what can this be? We were going to do out of our house at one point, which we quickly diffused that idea. And then we ultimately landed on the cloud kitchen. And so at this point, that was like the progression of Giada. We launched the cloud kitchen. This was like day zero, was like entering that kitchen. And then do you want me to like keep going
Well,
here?
yeah, no. So one of the first things I wanted to ask, a lot of times when you're sitting around with your boys, right, late at night, after a night out, or whatever it may be, you're plotting on ideas. Yo, what if we created
Yeah,
this? What if we, made this happen? Or what if we went on this trip? A lot of times, those ideas, those conversations kind of fizzle out, right? They stop at the what if and they don't
always.
keep going. But it sounds like for you and your best friends that sort of started up Giada, you said, "What if we started a restaurant, right?" And then
Yeah.
now you have one. So how did you get to that point of bridging the gap of an idea, putting it to action, and then actually seeing it through?
Yeah, I can tell you're talking to a lot of people about this shit because that is so true. Like, I feel like that whole concept of like having an idea and then not actually going through from the execution side of it is true. I feel like it happens to everybody. I have 30 ideas in this house with all my friends that we won't get to just because we don't have the time. But I think for us and Giada, I mean, so I have two core co-founders, and we have a fourth who is kind of taking a partner role, but he's still very fundamental to everything we do. What I think is really important about the four of us is that we're very dissimilar in terms of our skill sets. I focus more on the business end. My co-founder Noah is kind of like the operational force that keeps us alive. He is the one in the kitchen. He was the one that was really like day one figuring all this shit out because none of us had a food background. And then Max and Jack Wells, the other Jack, are really our brand masterminds. And so I think one thing that happens when people take on new concepts is they hit these points of like not knowing how to do something. And then it becomes discouraging because in the scenario where you have a full-time job and like you're doing something on the side, it's like, oh, like I don't want to circumvent, I don't know how to circumvent this. So for us, I think we had this ability to kind of like do a lot more than I think your stereotypical deli owner maybe was able to, right? Like we were able to spin up a business plan very quickly, and we were able to, have somebody on the ground in one of the best restaurants in LA learning every day. And we had people from a brand perspective that you probably don't find in delis. So these things were all accelerants for us. Um, and so I think there was that was really helpful. And I think the other thing for us that was a challenge, but also became I think our biggest strength, is that we came into this with no food background. And so from, the first time we started taking this seriously, we were very cognizant of the fact we didn't know anything. Right. So when we go into these introductions with people in hospitality, people that have scaled restaurant brands, people that have scaled any brand, we come in as students, like, and there's no ego on calls with us. We get on, we're taking notes, we're taking everything very seriously, and we appreciate advice from anybody, whether they are Danny Meyer at Shake Shack or like a customer that walks in our store. Because for us, we're taking this day by day. We have no idea what's going on. So I think for us, it was a combination of having a great set of skills. And I think if you look at like any like venture, like Y Combinator has a lot of great content around starting startups. And like their whole thing is like the founders are like the first piece, obviously. So I think we got lucky with the mix shift of us. And then I think the second thing is just the mindset of like really being prepared to know you don't know everything, and kind of make that like the chip on your shoulder as you go through solving problems.
So you said you worked in the up in Silicon Valley, up in the Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, and you hated it.
Yeah.
Then you got laid off. Was this kind of this project when you were going through kind of like that transition period? Was this what you put all your eggs in the basket for, or were you thinking, all right, I'm gonna like your buddy did, I'm gonna work at a restaurant to get my bearings, and then I'm gonna talk about this on the side? Or are you like, all right, like forget the finance, forget what I've been doing, I'm locked in on this idea?
So let me also add one more thing in your previous question that you just reminded me of. But the really one of the most important things I think is you need to have on your founding team like an internal optimist, or somebody that's just like not gonna get swayed by any just type of hurdle, like that type of person. And that was Noah for us really early on. Like this was a guy at a very stable job out of college making a lot of money, when this idea, honestly, for like Max and I, we had other things going on. We weren't ready to quit our jobs, right? Noah, 6 to 7 months before we were supposed to be that cloud kitchen. This is almost a full year before we actually launched. He quit his corporate job to go work at a restaurant just to learn. That level of commitment, we would not be where we are without him. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's like obviously one of the most important things. But to your question about the eggs in the baskets, so for me, I was at PwC until the end of 2019. I really wanted to be more in a startup environment. So I joined a startup in LA called Clutter. It's an on-demand storage company. And so I was there like 7 months, got laid off. And so just out of like a knee-jerk reaction, I applied to business school. And I had that on the table and was going to go, right? Because like at that moment of uncertainty in the world, it felt like the safest way to insulate myself. I think a lot of people probably had that same reaction. And so, that was the plan. I was going to do that. And then I had, 5 months where I was going to go. So I started working on Giada day to day, kind of just because I had the time and it was something that I cared about. And so, by June, we launched as the Cloud Kitchen. And I think that the combination of, the heightened delivery demand, heightened digital presence for consumers, and people just wanting to see positive things coming out of a very dark restaurant industry at the time really gave us some like amazing acceleration out of the gate. And so for me, it went from like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'll go to business school and then I'll do it part time to like, I can't leave, like I cannot leave. And so for me, that was difficult because like when I always thought of myself like 2 years ago, I was like, big market cap companies. I want to be involved in like things that are going to drive a lot of business value, like technology companies. And so for me, like trying to take that mindset and apply to a deli, probably not the way most people would think about a deli. But for me, I felt like we had something really special in LA because I really thought we had identified a gap in what's supposed to be one of the most competitive food markets in the world. So it was important for me. So what I ended up deciding to do was defer business school for a year and work on this full time. And so that's what happened. And it was the most like rewarding and very stressful and concerted year. It was like I can't even explain to you like the volatility of my emotional state last year. It was insane. Everybody had that with COVID, but like I think doing what we were doing, like in a 250 square foot kitchen with no windows, like dealing with the happiest customer and the angriest customer, all these things were very emotional. And not knowing what you're supposed to do 2 or 3 weeks out and just kind of learning every day. So now we're kind of like encroaching on that 1 year mark. And for me, the way I'm thinking about it is like, I'm kind of focused personally on like just I prioritize optionality and like learning opportunity. So like for me, I'm fortunate enough that the business school programs that I am enrolled in let me defer again, which is, I just can't.
So you're deferring for a second year?
Yeah, I didn't know it was possible, but I wrote an honest letter to both of them or the school that I'm enrolled in, and I was just like, this is what's going on. I started this while I was supposed to go, and it's so amazing, and I don't know what to do, and I know you probably haven't heard many examples of things like this, but I feel like I need to be here longer, full time, living with my co-founders in LA. So that was of recent, and then now I'm really fortunate that I have a remote job that I've started actually last week at a startup in San Francisco that I'm doing Monday through Friday. So from like 9 to 6 p.m. I'm at that startup, and then 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. is Giada time, and then 6 p.m. post is Giada time, and then today and yesterday on the weekends I'm behind the register. So I've packed my schedule to the brim, but story is I'm finding ways to kind of keep all my options open, and kind of like solving for things as I go, I suppose, with what I know in the moment.
Okay, that's crazy. So you deferred business school not one time, but I'm sure they don't mind it though, because that means that when you do eventually go to the business school, they're gonna have a guy who knows how to run a business.
I completely agree with you. I think some of the programs are definitely like I think there's some ego on the admissions committee, and they just want to convert their like admits. Right. But I think when you think about it that way and you're objective about it, 100%. Like, I think that for me, like, I feel like you hear about like consulting, for example, like out of undergrad, people are like, oh, the learning curve so steep, all these things. Now that I have built a one location restaurant business, I can tell you unequivocally, like, there's a large gap in true fundamental business understanding from what you're doing in a consulting firm and when you build something from a pitch deck to reality, like. And so from a business school perspective, I completely agree. Like me personally, even thinking about how I would utilize that degree, because you're supposed to go in with a plan and use it for a purpose. Mm-hmm. Me lacking any of the experience I have for the last year and a half, I don't think it's the same experience for me. I really don't. I think I have a much more developed perception of like thinking through businesses because I've had, I think, a pretty unique mix of things, but one of the main parts of that mix being Giada at this point.
Okay. So you get the idea, you guys are rolling, then you start as a cloud kitchen. Now, my understanding of a cloud kitchen is it's not a storefront. It's kind of like, I don't know if you were in College Park when it was Good Uncle. I don't know if you remember the Good Uncle, the food trucks that went around to where they cooked the food like in the back of the truck when they would drive around College Park. What, just for people that don't know, like, how do you explain what a cloud kitchen really is?
Yeah, well, I definitely didn't have a food truck in Maryland.
Really?
But that sounds good. What kind of food is it?
It was like burgers, like chicken sandwiches, stuff like that. it was good for like a year, and then I think you're talking about scaling and things like that. I think they scaled in the wrong direction because like the quality of the food kind of
Yeah.
decreased, the prices went up, and then before you know it, they were gone after a year.
Damn, I was a buffalo chicken sandwich at Bentley's guy. So
Gotcha.
that
Can't go wrong
was
with that.
that's what I go to. But what were we talking about? We're talking about
This
the
cloud
cloud
kitchen,
kitchen.
like how
So
you found that idea.
yeah, so we were introduced to it by a mutual friend of ours. He actually went through Y Combinator for a cloud kitchen startup before they were as kind of prevalent as they are now. This was like 2 years ago. So we had been like aware of the space just coincidentally through this friend for some time. And as we were scoping our idea, this was something that we had considered loosely, but didn't take it seriously until COVID. But to describe it, I would imagine it, if I've never seen one before, as like it's a large warehouse facility, not tall ceilings, but like it's in square footage, it probably resembles a warehouse, and it's got partitioned units.
Okay.
So it's a large facility of about 30 subsidiary units that are outfitted as kitchens. So there's hoods in them, stoves, and then within it there's hallways. So it almost kind of looks like you've got it's like a high school hallway with the classrooms on each side. And then there's a centralized fulfillment team that is working for Cloud Kitchens, the operator. It's the name of the company that owns them. There's other providers too, but this is the one we were in. And so basically, your setup there is you have an order manager, which is a software middleware that integrates with DoorDash, Uber Eats, Postmates, etc. Pushes all your orders into one centralized queue, and then you have your kitchen staff in there responding to the queue, fulfilling tickets, putting the bags outside in the hallway. The fulfillment staff up front has 50 locations of queues they're managing, and they're coming grabbing your bags to bring them out to the drivers. And so the the value I think for us at the time when we made the decision was low initial startup costs to get in there. We were from initial convo with them about entering in that location like 3 weeks later we had entered. So it's very fast ramp up time. I think the limitations of it arise when you hit like critical mass with your business. Your unit economics are strained because they take a percent of your revenue. And I truly believe that you can only service, there's a ceiling to your volume operating that way, both from an operational perspective. And I just think scaling your brand as a cloud kitchen, you have limitations. And then we found some things we didn't love just about not owning the full customer experience, right? Like when you're not the one handing the bag off to your customer. And there were customers who did try to do pickup there because they appreciated our brand and they wanted to come see us. And they showed up, and there's like a graffiti covered building in an area of Los Angeles that I think most of the people who probably resonate with our brand probably weren't going to, just generally. And so I can't tell you like how many calls I got from like a family, like, hey, we actually don't feel comfortable getting our food. We're gonna just leave it, but thank you. I wouldn't know what to say, but so I think that is kind of high level. But I think to sum it all up, it's digitally focused restaurant operation. You're doing primarily delivery order volume, and you're able to get in there pretty quickly and for not a ton of money, but over the long term, your profit's limited.
Okay. So sounds like you're saying, a little less control over sort of the product after it leaves your hands. So what was the jump from going to the cloud kitchen to finding a location, right? Finding you guys are down on Melrose, right? Is that the same location that you began with? Did you move? Like what was that jump like?
Yeah, so we launched in June. By about September, we were starting to have these realizations that we were building a brand, but the business was lagging. And I think that was honestly a huge learning for us is like building a brand and building a business are not synonymous. They help each other. They're like loosely correlated, but it's not one does the other. They're very distinct. So September rolls around. We had all this excitement we felt about kind of what we were doing in LA. And we were, now really focused on like the business side of things. And what we could see was that like, when you rolled out a forecast, we didn't like how it looked. And we also were just like anecdotally feeling the customer experience things that were going on. So for us, we kind of had this thought we got to get out of there. And by literally, I mean, the backstory is kind of insane, but my co-founder's younger sister has a good friend that goes to USC who works at an amazing real estate development firm called Creative Spaces. She's an intern there now, is joining them full time after college. This same individual happens to be a food blogger at Spoon University, USC.
Okay.
She reached out to us in June and was like, "Hey, like I would love doing an interview, guys." We did an interview with her. Absolutely love this girl. She's amazing. Her name's Mara. And so that was the intro to her. And you roll it forward a month. She's catered her office at her summer internship. The CEO, Tyler Stonebrick, who's one of our really close, advisors and friends at this point, was like, "I need to meet these guys. Like, what are they doing?" And so we got this intro. And so the progression there is that he ultimately was working with a family from the East Coast that had purchased a lot of real estate on the east side of Los Angeles, and they had a spot they wanted to put us in. They liked the story. They're East Coast people that really kind of appreciated deli sandwiches. So that opportunity came available to us in September to move on to Melrose. And so from September to December, we're going through lease, LOIs, and kind of understanding the mechanics of what we were about to do from like a contract perspective. And then we were planning for we had a kitchen consultant come in to tell us how we needed to structure our kitchen. And we're working with a variety of designers to think through the design of the space. And we broke ground in December, closed our cloud kitchen end of December. So January and February at this point, full planning mode to enter Melrose. And then on March 17th, we entered Melrose. So this is now our 5th week at this brick and mortar. And now we're just taking day by day, making sure that what we've designed is working. And then next thought for us is trying to get a second location, hopefully in Venice on the west side.
Okay. And so you opened up March 17th, you said. Now, March in LA was a terrible time, right? We had like the 4 COVID tiers, and then we had like the lockdown. We weren't even in like the COVID tiers yet. So you're going on this huge venture, right? You're going all in with this. You left the cloud kitchen. You have a location. The whole point of having the location, right, is so people can come in to have that experience, to see you, to get their hands on the product. But when you open up, right, they can't do that. So what was it like, moving into this new location, but then because of what was going on in the world, you probably couldn't, do the things that you wanted to do or grow as quickly as you maybe have wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing, and this is just like a restaurant trend, is just that like you got to be good at delivery right now, and you need to have that technology stack in place. And so for us, coming out of the cloud kitchen, that was our default. Was like, well, we're delivery first. Now we're just letting people come in and order and register. So from that perspective, we knew we were going to take a lot of the elements out of that operating model and apply them to our brick and mortar. We were going to be a very software friendly operation. So we had that going for us. As we looked at Melrose, it's 750 square feet. It's a second generation space, which means it was outfitted to be a restaurant prior. So the actual structural changes to the building were limited. So, we're looking at the way they used it before. The prior restaurant operator, they had seating in there. It kind of made no sense. It's 750 square feet. Like, you can have like 3 tables.
Right.
It did. So for us, we started now thinking about, okay, well, like, what do we want to do here? And we had like, order volume goals, sales goals. Like we knew how much we wanted to be able to do. And when you looked at it on a blueprint, we were like, we need more space. So what we ended up doing was designing Melrose to maximize for operational use. So out of that 750 square feet, probably 650 square feet of it is either front of house or back of house area. Front of house being like cold deli, bagging, register. Back of house is where we have the fryers, toasters, and ovens. So we can, for 750 square feet, we have a lot packed in there. Okay. And so rolling that all together, we were designed very well for COVID operating as a restaurant. Like we have minimized risk, I believe, because we don't have wait staff. We don't have customers on site. There's no bathroom for customers. And it's very easy for us to maintain the premises because it's what our staff does. And we have a very strict regimen every morning for them to come in and sanitize and all these things. So from that end, launching in the middle of that COVID spike was tricky. We had to be very aware of everything going on. But because we had done it last summer when it was like, maybe the spike wasn't as severe, but I think the level, the uncertainty and how precarious it was probably more so.
Right.
It kind of prepared us in a way. And so for us, yeah, I think it was, just having a restaurant operation that has limited opportunity, I think, for like non-COVID friendly occurrences, I suppose. So we were designed well for that. And I think that's what's kind of allowed us to like do a lot of volume and sell out most days, but also keep it safe for our staff, our customers, all the service providers that come and see us.
I took a look at the menu. I took the Instagram. First of all, your Instagram is crazy. Like when I look
And
at it, I'm hungry. Like it's on my list to make it out to the shop here, either next weekend or the weekend after. But in the video, I'm gonna be popping up pictures of the sandwiches and things like that. So, what's like your go-to item on the menu, or your kind of most favorite thing that you guys make?
man, well, I had a spicy pea this morning,
Okay.
which is our chicken parm with spicy vodka sauce. That sandwich outsells everything on the menu by many multiples. We do like 100 of those a day. It's kind of crazy. But I would say like my like kind of more like I would say like my smart money sandwich would be you get an Olivia, which is a chicken pesto salad sandwich that our chef made. Her name is Olivia. It's on ciabatta, and I get a side of balsamic vinaigrette that is homemade by Olivia as well. In our back of house team, and I dip it in the balsamic.
Okay.
That is what I recommend to people. I do it, I don't force it on people, but when I have recommended it, it hasn't missed. 10 out of 10, everyone loves it. They come back every again.
And the names of the different sandwiches. So you have the Olivia, which is named after your chef. Do we got one named after your dog? Like, you know what I'm saying? Does your little sister get any love? Like, how did that work out?
Yeah. Little sis is on the menu.
Okay.
The Madeline is named after my sister. She also doubles as our TikTok social media manager.
Awesome.
Shout out Maddie. We call her Dior sometimes. She's in the stock. And then so we have the Lori, which is named after Max's mom. Okay. Fun fact about Max is that he's a vegetarian and he can't eat like 90% of the things on our menu. So we make the joke that he's the only vegetarian deli owner ever. Probably not true, but we still think it's funny. And then the Antonia is named after Noah's little sister. And what else do we have? We'll pull up our menu. I believe it is just those three with naming conventions. Oh, the J Stilly. So one of our childhood best friends, Jesse Stillerman, has been living in LA about as long as we have. We've known him, probably since we were 10. He actually has been one of our early employees at both locations. He was in our cloud kitchen initially. At first, kind of honestly just helping us out of love to launch, and then became like our kind of source of truth for like a lot of aspects of what we were doing. So very integral in our cloud kitchen launch. And then now at Melrose, he's kind of served that same role for us. He made a sandwich called the J Stilly, which is a grilled chicken sandwich with Calabrian honey, chilies, and prosciutto. Is insane. I highly recommend giving that one a try.
I think what I'm gonna have to do is order about two. Bring people with me. Each of us order a sandwich, a different one, and then we kind of cut it up, and then we kind of share it around that way.
I would recommend doing that. It's always tough, like when people ask, "Oh, what should I get?" Like, I think I default to the spicy pea because we sell so many, and same with the classic Italian. That's probably our second biggest seller. But like for me, there's such a wide variety of the ingredients in our sandwiches. You really do need like 3 or 4 to kind of get what's going on here. But when in doubt, spicy pea.
Absolutely. Okay. So kind of taking it back to kind of mention like your Instagram feed is doing real well. You mentioned that you guys were going to launch at Coachella. Obviously that couldn't happen. What have you been able to do over the last, few months, few weeks, whatever it may be, to get eyes on the shop, whether it be, getting a cater to people's lunches, kind of like how you started off or whatever it may be. How are you getting people in LA to notice you guys?
Yeah. So I think this has changed over time, right? Like I think now we're fortunate that we have a pretty strong and loyal following. So now I think our calculus is different. When we launched, this was kind of what was going through our minds. No storefront, we're a digital brand. We need to get eyeballs on us, and we need to do it in like a cost effective manner. So we kind of had two strategies here. The first, my one of my best friends from Maryland, Jared Nozick, he worked at Live Nation doing growth marketing. He had been laid off in the pandemic too. And him and I, we kind of had some entrepreneurial history together, and we're always on the phone, just like throwing ideas back and forth. And I called him and I was like, dude, like, I really think we need to run paid social media ads for Giada and have them convert into online orders. And, I know there are restaurants doing that at the time, but at that point in time, not what it is now. Now I think every restaurant is, oh, you need to run ads. But a year and a half ago wasn't the case. And so Jared was like, oh, I did this at growth marketing. I did growth marketing at Live Nation. This is literally my job. Like, let me do this for you. So Jared came on and was really helping us kind of design our paid marketing infrastructure. And, he's since started a restaurant focused digital marketing firm, which is kind of insane. I'd like to just point out Giada was his case study when he got his first client.
Oh.
But so that was huge. And we were able to convert orders at a really amazing customer acquisition cost that was scalable. So we were, ramping marketing spend into the summer and just saw better performance. And so that was huge for us. I think the second aspect was an advantage to starting a business. I think at the age we did it, especially a consumer brand, is that three of us Mino and Max went to Maryland, Michigan, and NYU respectively. And these are big networks, especially in LA. So I think that when you have three people with three distinct sets of college networks all doing something interesting together, you have this kind of like guerrilla marketing flywheel around it of people it's just like an interesting thing. Like I think even now for me, like if I see other people starting things, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Like I want to support, I want to be engaged. So there's that. And then, we just were cognizant of the influencer dynamic in consumer brands,
Right.
Not to the point where like we're paying, like that's something we would never do is like pay for a post. But what we do try to do is just like acknowledge opportunity when we see it, right? So like if we know somebody works at a talent agency and is the assistant of so-and-so's agent, we will ask said agent if they would like want lunch one day. And we've had good outcomes when things like that happen. So it's kind of those three things. I think there's like when you're starting the brand, like we were last year, sometimes you got to put some dollars behind marketing, right? Because you got to work to get people to look at you. Now, at this point in time, what we're trying to do is focus a little bit less on the paid marketing side. We're still, watching it closely. It's still something that we're going to do long term, but we're trying to diversify our content across our different channels. So for us, this really means looking at something like TikTok. A lot of brands, I think, get turned off by just the nuance of it. For us, we're like, no, we have to figure this out and make it work for us. Thank God I have a sister that just happens to be really naturally good at TikTok.
Right.
She is the talk boss. You should hear her yell at us on Saturday and Sunday mornings. We give her an hour each morning to film stuff. And like this morning, people were not wanting to get out of bed. So like, but the point being is that like, we're very much focused on diversifying our existence on different channels, in part because I really think that that's important as you scale a brand, is that you have different levers you can pull. You can ultimately maximize your following doing stuff like that. And I think we're also looking to focus on telling our story a lot. When we were early, we were just like figuring out what was going on. We didn't even really know the story we were telling. And now that I think we have some bearings beneath us and we're really kind of trying to take a second to reflect on what's happening, we all believe we have a pretty interesting story. So we're really trying to like weave the posts we have to be much more intentional, to take into account what we've done, but also like what we believe in. Like we're not afraid to like comment on things happening in the world. And we're not afraid to like acknowledge the authenticity of what we're doing. Like for us, some of the things we're most excited about is posting things about our staff, right? Like telling their story. Like the restaurant community, the people that work in restaurants are some of the most amazing individuals, I think, ever. Like when you really take a second and understand like the DNA of who comes and works in restaurants, I mean, I could talk about it all day. They're incredible types of people, all different walks of life, all different ages, all different reasons for being there, but they're ultimately part of like one cohesive family that like brings hospitality to a customer. So that's something we take a lot of pride into. But I can keep going on this, so I'll let you I'll let you stop me.
That's awesome that you have your little sister kind of running the TikTok kind of deal for you, but sort of stripping away the Giada itself and the company that you're working for now. You're working like you said from 7 to 9, then from 9 to 5, and then from 5 to whatever it may be. What sort of discipline do you have to have, or what sort of kind of mindset for a young kid who maybe is coming out of college, who wants to have a main hustle and a side hustle, or someone who wants to pick up a side, whatever it may be. How do you sort of
Yeah.
keep yourself level headed to where you're doing a million things at once during the day, but you still have time for yourself, your mental health, your physical health, all that stuff?
Jesus. Okay, that's a dense one. So like I think so for me and like my schedule, I'm very a lot of people see my calendar and get freaked out by it. But for me, I think one thing that was helpful about starting my career in consulting is that job and that type style of work is very indexed on being, you know, scheduled and clearly defining goals because you're talking to a client. So it's like client has a very complex problem. You're supposed to break it down into modules, explain to them how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, why you're going to do it. These types of thought frameworks. And for me, that has stuck with me. And I just think that like when I approach the things I do, I'm very much thinking about not so much the big problem at hand, but it's okay, what do I have to do to like get this done? And it just like for me has become just how I approach things. So I really try to like, if we're like building a deck for an investor, it's like, okay, yes, investor deck, but like, what are the subsections of the deck? How are we going to get this information into the deck? When should we review? Like, and I try to break everything down. So that's how I approach my schedule, just being very pragmatic, and I think intentional. And like from the side hustle thing and like trying to get that going, I mean, I think before you even try to do that, I think you just need to ask yourself if you have the motivation to do it. Because I definitely would not I would not recommend my schedule to myself at 22 when I graduated from Maryland.
Okay.
That you need to balance, and I've made this mistake in the past, is I think you need to like be realistic with yourself and acknowledge like what you can actually take on. Like I remember like at points in my past where I felt like I just had too much going on the side and like and typically it wasn't my main role that got impacted. It was the side things. And like I'm the type of guy, if I'm involved in something, I want to give it 110%. So that's how I think about getting involved in things. Like, can I give something 110%? The answer is yes, I'll typically do it. But so I think there's that. You need to just know what you can do, and then you need to have the motivation to like be able to do these things, right? Like if you're somebody that wants to go watch TV at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, I wouldn't recommend starting a business on the side of your main job. But and that's also like not to generalize. Like I'm sure I've watched TV at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, but I think the point being is like if at 6 p.m. you are irritated by having to go do some work after your other work, like this could become frustrating for you
Right.
at scale. So I think that you gotta be able to like push yourself a little bit and really be uncomfortable, like very uncomfortable, a lot, many days of your week. And so I think if these things are like things you can think through, accept, I think then you're like I think prepared mentally to go do it. And then I think the other thing for like a side hustle in general, and I think this applies to like anything you are doing, is like just to have your goal clearly defined. Like I would definitely not recommend devoting a lot of hours of your time to something that you don't have like clear line of sight of like why you're doing it. And I think that could be like if you're starting a business, like what's the problem the business is solving, or what's the service or the product, like having that goal oriented kind of mindset I think is like very crucial, especially because your time is your investment. So like you just need to be intentional with the way you allocate it. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I think one of the last things I wanted to ask, and you really just touched on it. You're saying if you're gonna have sort of a side hustle, something that you're going after, you got to have clear goals. You got to have a clear vision on what you want to do. With Giada, I mean, like, what's next? Like, what are you guys looking to do? What are you striving for? What can the people watching see out of Giada in the next, 6 months, year, 5 years? Like, where's this thing headed?
And it's a great question. It changes a lot, like the goal, right? I think that we had a goal and a vision before we launched, and then now that we've launched, we've learned what it's like to have this brick and mortar, and I think it has informed how we're thinking about the future. I think for us, what I can say for sure, we want we want to be a scaled restaurant business. We want to have many locations. We want to be in different cities. We want to be, on both coasts. We have all these aspirations. We have a very kind of um, I think we have a very specific mindset towards how we're going to scale. It's not, I think it lies somewhere in between. Like, we have a slide in one of the decks we've used that talks about brand differentiation, or brand prestige and business scale, and how there's kind of a trade off between the two. Like, kind of the more hyper curated you are with your locations, I think you can maintain some level of brand equity. And then, if you scale out like an In and Out, I think their brand is great, but like it's different. You're not going to be like a Kith at 5,000 locations.
Right.
So there's that. And so we want to, do our locations, get to scale, make decisions pragmatically from a business perspective, but also, we are very aware of our brand as we make business decisions. So there's that. There's things we can do with our brand relevant to food, relevant to hospitality, relevant to being an interesting consumer brand that I think we can achieve in that, it's different products, in and out of food. And I think ultimately, like you know, we think a lot about kind of hospitality groups that we want to emulate a lot. I think there's examples of those in New York, LA, Miami, like all those big cities that really kind of drive the innovation there. And we if Giada can get to a point where it's developed a lot of intrinsic business value, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to hopefully build more brands, and maybe even be able to help other operators build their own brands. This is obviously we have to do a lot before we can get to this point. But I think that you want to be able to get to that position, right? I think that when you build business value, you get to then make decisions what you do with it. So that's something we think about a lot too. But right now, we're focused on making this week better than last week.
I think that's a good way to look at it, and definitely glad to be able to have you on. Typically my previous guests have been more sports related, and I wanted to be able to kind of have an even playing field of the people that I come on and talk to. So you're kind of like my first, and it's funny because the concept is taking lunch, and you specialize in lunch. That's kind of your go-to thing.
I love that. I'm happy. That's hilarious. Yeah, no, that's great. And dude, honestly, like I really love the content you're leaning into. Like I remember early on after college, kind of like building up all this anticipation to go take a consulting job, and there were amazing things that came out of that job. I really am so grateful that I had that experience. But I very much so found myself like, on those Wednesdays at 11 p.m. when I was still in the slide deck, kind of having this like desire to be involved in creative business and really kind of like be able to operate it myself, and build something. And so like for me, I think where I am now is like a lot of what I used to kind of think about. It was like, how can I have like a side hustle that is cool and I'm really, really like fundamentally interested in it, and I could do it with my friends. Like all these things, like things I had in my mind, and now like that it's happened. I think that like hearing about somebody that could have done a similar type of thing would have been really helpful, because at that point in time, like when you're working at a big company like that, there's not many people there that are like building businesses on the side. And I think in some of the more narrow-minded settings, people are probably like not super supportive of somebody doing that, which I think is silly in a way. I think Google has a like an outward kind of stance on like giving employees time to do entrepreneurial innovative stuff, and I think that's probably the right direction of how to think about it. But yeah, man, this is great stuff. It's really cool to see all this come together. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, like I said, I appreciate you. I know, busy man. Your Sundays. I'm sure you want to get back to that. But again, I appreciate you for coming on. I definitely will be making a trip down to get a couple sandwiches, and I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing, you guys grow. I'm looking forward to seeing everything that this turns into. Based on our conversation, I mean, you're the right guy, kind of behind the wheel, and like I said, all the best luck to you guys.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. And yeah, next time you take your lunch, come do it. Come do it at Java.
Will do. All right, man.